Welcome back. Everyone's energized. That's really great. Let's get cracking. So, for most of human history, we know that being part of a group or the act of gathering meant safety and survival. To prepare for today, I've had the joy of reading through a range of books on this to sort of familiarize myself with the rich tradition of that. To know, it's personally quite grounding for me to know that all of these books come to a very similar conclusion, which is that when we come together, we're able to overcome a lot more than we would if we were to be divided. I find that grounding personally, but also for my work. It kind of flips the script on the narrative that we have this predisposition or we're predetermined to be at war with one another in our communities and elsewhere. So for the next 11 minutes, I want to explore something that might seem obvious, which is that how we bring people together and build trust is one of the most practical ways we can contribute to peace. Not abstract peace or peace far away, but peace in our own communities. This is a very simple calculation, and it's at the core, I think, of what a lot of us have been talking about today, but also the reason we're here today. So this morning, I want to share some of my own learning from this, from my experiences across Europe, but also my learnings from this time as a Peace Fellow. Specifically, to share lessons from the practice of gathering at times when trust in my own community or communities I'm part of have been extremely low. I think you know something about that here in the US too, here in North Carolina. So it's not too, I have to explain too much what's going on here, but it's quite sobering. Nearly, or more than 4 in 5 rather, Americans say they're exhausted by division. You might know something about that. The majority are genuinely worried about political divisions. That's courtesy of Fox News. And finally, a significant number of Americans see people on the other side not just as wrong, but as a threat to their way of life. It's a very dangerous place to be. I'm sure you'll agree. It's also easy to see this data and reports like this, and also to live this in your own lives and feel the need to retreat into more close and familiar circles. But since we're at a peace conference and I'm here to talk about the art of gathering, we can't do that. I'm going to suggest that now is the right time, is really the only time that we should start thinking more intentionally about how we gather, about how we bring people in from the margins of our own lives, whether we've marginalized them ourselves or they've marginalized us. In other words, I'd like to talk about how to avoid the urge to isolate ourselves from those we've disagreed with, or sometimes felt the need to marginalize ourselves from, and how to begin the process of proactively rebuilding trust through intentional gathering. These images oh, nice. That's good. That could have been really awkward if we just stood here for 10 minutes waiting for them. These images are a reminder that coming together across deep division is nothing new. As a species, we're remarkably good at it, even after immense hardship and suffering. What these moments don't show, what the cameras don't show, is everything that came before. The weeks, months, and years of relationship building. The conversations that didn't go so well. The slow, unglamorous room of creating enough trust to even be in the room in the first place. The great Nelson Mandela said it best, and he understood this more than most. This quote is from his memoir, and it stays with me. Both sides regarded discussions as a sign of weakness and betrayal, but there are times when a leader must move ahead of the flock. I don't think he's describing, or just describing, leadership at the nation-state level. I think he's talking about something much more everyday. The willingness to move toward the conversation before everyone else is ready. That's something I've been learning and thinking back to in my own work. And for me, that started with something called TCFT. It's a intergenerational program for young people, artists, mentors, community leaders across Europe. We meet for sometimes a day, sometimes 2 weeks, and we're hosted in communities across Europe, sometimes communities that have gone through extreme hardship. For 12 years of that work has taught me that bringing people together across difference is genuinely an art form. It requires real partnerships, constant learning, and a particular kind of humility. That's the reflex of asking who we're excluding to our conversation in the panel, of trusting others to lead, and of listening more than we speak. It's hard for people like me. And then there's food, my favorite part. We cook together, we eat together, and sit alongside one another before, during, after workshops, participants and facilitators alike. It won't surprise you to know that some of the most important work in relationship building in TCFT and in diplomacy happens over food. And part of that for TCFT is that we've been hosted in places like Italy and the Balkans, where the food is really good. It's really easy to do that. But also, like mealtime, this work is messy sometimes. It doesn't always work. But hosting these large residencies, particularly in places like Srebrenica, has taught me a lot of lessons. And those lessons became really valuable in my own country, in my own community, when Brexit arrived. For us in TCFT, and those of us who are proud of our British and European identities, Brexit was a wake-up call. In the months and years following that vote, a lot of our work had shifted. Not by accident, but because we felt it was important to strengthen our links with partners across Europe, to continue building bridges between communities. But we also know that we had a lot of work to do at home. So a lot of that learning in post-conflict settings became really useful. This is where Priya Parker's book, The Art of Gathering, came in for me. It's a great book, and I strongly recommend it. There are so many gems in this book, but one that stuck with me is that a lot of the work of peace building and the work of gathering begins before you've even got people through the room. It's about the expectations that you set before they arrive. So the need for you to be clear about the purpose of that gathering in the first place. So during the Brexit years, we had to get clear about our purpose as an organization. We weren't there to debate Brexit. We certainly weren't there to change anyone's mind on the vote that they'd already cast. But we were there because we were genuinely worried about what happens to a community once you stop the ability to talk to one another, or if you just keep arguing every time you do. For us, that was the honest answer of our purpose. And it turns out a lot of people, thank you, a lot of people in Dorset shared that concern, even if we didn't agree, and even if we weren't on the same side of the political spectrum, or even the same side of that binary leave or remain vote. But like everywhere else, once we got in the room, we built trust first, we shared food, and we created. I personally learned so much from that, and I think this is why this might be relevant to some of the stuff that's going on here in the US. About 4 years after Brexit, not really related to Brexit, I moved to London and started a job at the US Embassy in the ambassador's office in London. I was very curious at the time about diplomacy and the way that nation states come together, the way that they gather. I thought I had a lot to learn about that. What I found when I started that job and through organizing ambassadors' roundtables, receptions, convenings of all sorts, was that the work was very, very, very familiar to the work that I've been doing in Dorset and elsewhere. It was about building trust. It was about setting expectations before people came to the room. It was about welcoming everybody and checking who's at the fringes of the room in any kind of event, reception, who's on the margins. I learned in both worlds that it was important to create the conditions for people to want to come in the first place. That's in the way that you invite people, the way that you host them, the way that you welcome them. It's important once they're in the room to be open to dialogue. It's really important to not cast your own view and opinions on them before they've even set foot in the room. Let them have a space and let them come into it first. Also, most important of all, was to leave room for people to come back next time, even if there was a difficult conversation, even if negotiations didn't go well, to create the space for people to want to come back, to continue the conversation next time. I also learned, quite importantly, at the embassy, the need to understand the limits and the reach of your convening power as an organization or an individual, and how solid partnerships and unlikely alliances can help with that. As a Peace Fellow, I've been fortunate to spend time thinking more about this, grappling of the question of how we gather, and to better understand how each and every one of us, even the introverts, have the capacity to convene. Also, if you're a bit exhausted, completely understandable. This is where I think Priya Parker's book comes in. Priya says in her book that sometimes gathering less for shorter amounts of time, but with more intentional rituals, is all that's needed. If you feel busy and overwhelmed, step back and think about the purpose of what you're doing, the purpose of every encounter you have. In Priya's book, she talks about birthday parties, meetings, business meetings, all being the same. You think about the purpose, you think about why you're inviting people into the room. It'll be a lot easier to have conversations in them, especially the difficult ones. So reflecting on my time at the embassy and TCFT and my time as a Peace Fellow, I wanted to share some thoughts with everybody in the room. I think we're all pretty good. We're all here on a Saturday convening, gathering, so I don't need to sell you on the purpose of that. But there are things I think we can all do in our own lives, in our own communities, in our Rotary clubs that we can do to make that much easier to reach more people. Number one is understand your convening power. Every organization, every club has something they can offer that others can't. Understand that and embrace it. Number two, find a partner or a community leader that shares the same hope for dialogue, even if there are disagreements. In fact, especially if there are disagreements. Number three, never lead with the difficult conversations. Build the space first, create the conditions for trust, and then have the conversation. Number four, build an accessibility from the start. Regularly reflect on when you meet, where you meet, and the cost that has on the person coming, particularly financial cost, social cost, and emotional cost. Number five, my favorite, use food. It's really easy. This one speaks for itself. If the food is really good, people come back. Also, if it's really bad, people talk about it, and it's something to connect on. And lastly, be consistent. This is the hard bit. Trust isn't always built in one meeting. In fact, it rarely is. It's built by showing up again and again and again. If you're like me and you want to keep learning on this, I'd love to talk at the end if we could share emails. I've got a list of books and things to send you. Forgot to do a QR code. Sorry about that. But there are so many resources out there. People are thinking about this and grappling with these questions all the time. People at all levels of society from all backgrounds. So I appreciate the opportunity to share some of this with you today. I share this knowing and also assuming mostly that everybody here and people joining from home knows how precious it can be to gather and how much easier it is to overcome differences once we have. Mohammed said in the panel earlier, which I really liked, that in some communities and traditions, you need to invite people. You need to be the one to proactively bring them in. I agree with that completely. And I think also that applies to people that you've marginalized from your own life, perhaps because you have a political difference, perhaps because you voted a different way. And I do firmly believe from work in Brexit, in diplomacy, that now, especially right now, especially in North Carolina, is a particularly good time for us to start thinking about rebuilding trust in that way. Thank you.